Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. When Texas's abortion law went into effect at the beginning of this month, it caused quite a stir on the political landscape. Pro-abortion advocates railed against the legislation, claiming that it violated Roe v. Wade. Now, Democratic lawmakers are hoping to pass federal legislation that would essentially overrule Texas's new law. I have with me Liberty Nation's editor-at-large, James Fight, to discuss this issue. Welcome to the program, James.
Howdy.
Good to see you. I always, oscillate between calling you Jim or James, but I'm sure you get that a lot. Anyway.
It doesn't matter either way.
Yeah. So before we get into everything, why don't you give us a rundown on Texas's abortion law and what it does?
Basically what this abortion law does, and this is different from what we tend to see normally for a couple of reasons. So this is one of the heartbeat bills, which is kind of the popular thing now for states that want to make new abortion restrictions as they go for, okay, you can't have any abortions past whenever you can detect the fetal heartbeat. And of course, why that's so controversial for pro-abortion people is that, often you can detect the heartbeat before most women even realize they're pregnant. At the gestational age, obviously not before the woman knows she's pregnant, but
right.
But about 6 weeks, I think, is the earliest that you could expect to detect a fetal heartbeat, and that is before a lot of women realize that they're pregnant. Now, what makes this Texas heartbeat bill a little different is most of them include exceptions for you're exempted from this law and can have an abortion if the mother's life is at severe risk, and so to save the mother's life, or in a lot of states, or a lot of cases rather, if this is the pregnancy is a result of rape or incest. So there is no rape or incest exception clause in the Texas law, but there is an exemption to save the mother. But the big difference here really is that it's not just the state that can enforce this. So like you live in Texas. So if you found out that, say, a doctor at the hospital down the road did what under this law would be considered an illegal abortion, you could sue the hospital, individual Jeff Charles, not necessarily state of Texas. And now you're on your own for coming up with the money to make that happen. The legwork's all on you. But if you win, then the state would prohibit that medical facility from doing any abortions and award you like $10,000 or more, I guess, to cover your cost for the thing. So that's how it's a little different. And that's basically what the law does. Otherwise, it's a typical heartbeat bill.
Gotcha. Okay. So in your article, you mentioned the fact that the Supreme Court refused to take up the case and uphold the injunction that was filed against it. Well, why do you think they didn't want to deal with this?
Well, a brief rundown on the legal journey of this bill. There's not an actual injunction in place to stop it. Of course, it was challenged, but it was upheld by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. So the next logical place, the only remaining place, was the Supreme Court of the United States. And they didn't so much, like you said, they refused to take it up. So what the Supreme Court was asked for was an emergency injunction without trial to stop this bill from going into effect, law from going into effect September 1st. And they ruled 5-4, we're not going to do that. And the, Chief Justice John Roberts was actually very careful to specify this is not a ruling or a value judgment on the constitutionality of this bill. This is just us saying we're not going to block it without a trial. As for why, I suspect because they've actually agreed to take up another abortion case. So I suspect changes may be on the way.
I see. Okay. So then here's my question, because I did note that nuance where they weren't necessarily making a judgment on the law itself, but it was more on the injunction. So do you think that this might end up getting to the Supreme Court eventually?
I don't think that, it's possible, but I don't think this exact case will, because they're already agreeing to hear argument on a case over Mississippi's gestational age law. And so we have this precedent that was first established with the Roe v. Wade. Everybody's familiar with that.
Right.
That basically establishes a right to abort to some degree or other and limits the state's ability to regulate that. And that's the precedent. Now, this Mississippi law already has an injunction against it. It has been stayed. So the only real reason that you could expect the Supreme Court to agree to take this case up is that there's a plan to change something about that precedent, if not do away with it entirely. Now, and again, that's not guaranteeing that will be the outcome. Just pointing out that somebody on the Supreme Court, most likely a few somebodies, wants to take another look at this issue. And so this case may or may not render the Texas case completely moot.
I see. So there's a chance that this Mississippi case could actually have ramifications for Texas too. Look at that makes sense. Now, real quick, I do want to talk about the Women's Health Protection Act. And I mean, I was taking a look at this a while ago because I wrote an article about it. But they've been trying to get this passed for, I think, almost a decade. Now, in your article, you indicate that you don't think it's going to succeed. Now, in light of this whole uproar over Texas's law, why don't you think that this one will succeed in the Senate?
Well, it's just a numbers game. In order for this law to pass the Senate, they're either going to have to do away with the filibuster and have all of the Democrats on board, or keep the filibuster and have all the Democrats on board and win over 10 Republicans. Now, there may be a couple of Republicans, here's looking at you, Alaska, that would sign on with it if it looked like they could actually get it passed. But I just don't think there are 10. And that's assuming best case scenario, all Democrats are on board with it. There are 3 Democrat senators right now who were elected into office. They campaigned on, they ran under the Democrats for Life of America, which is an anti-abortion group of Democrats. I think from the womb to the tomb is their thing. It's like, we want to take care of you from the womb to the tomb. And so we're looking at West Virginia's Joe Manchin. We're looking at Indiana's Joe Donnelly and Pennsylvania's Bob Casey. So those are the 3 Democrats who, in the Senate, who are almost certainly not going to sign on, especially knowing that they can't get those 10 Republican votes anyways. So, the people that voted these anti-abortion Democrats into office, they're not going to risk upsetting those voters over a lost cause bill anyways. And the only reason that I think it really was big news that it cleared the House is because of the Texas law.
I see. Okay. Yeah. And we also had all that virtue signaling with Texas Democrats, taking their vacation in Washington, D.C. So,
Joe Biden's whole of government response.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I agree that, it's probably not going to pass. But, it doesn't mean that the pro-abortion lobby won't continue trying. So we'll be keeping an eye on this here at Liberty Nation. But definitely a thank you for joining me, Mr. Fight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yes. And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thanks for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, conservative news where truth matters.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.